Yes.
Thank you, Nehal ma'am. So I'll now be introducing Dr. Ghura. Dr. Ghura has a very diverse and impressive profile. Dr. Amarpreet Singh Ghura is the Assistant Professor for Entrepreneurship at Flame University. He is postdoctoral fellow from IIM Calcutta. He has done EPGD HRM from TIS, Tata Institute of Social Sciences. He's also worked with organizations such as IIM Ahmedabad and IIM Calcutta. He's active in the field of startup and has been instrumental in implementing corporate entrepreneurship culture in organizations. He is associated with as second generation entrepreneur in his family, managed his business for over 8 years. His research work has been accepted for publication in various journals like Entrepreneurship and Innovation in Emerging Economies, Stage Publications. I am Calcutta working with paper series. He has written over 10 teaching cases, which has been published in IIM Ahmedabad Case Center and Harvard Business Publishing, IIM Bangalore, and Harvard Business Publishing, IB Publishing. Vision, the Journal of Business Perspective, ABCDC, Emerald Emerging Market Case Study, EEMCS, and they are used in various institutions across the country. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. It's an honor to have you with us. I would now like to request you to address the delegates.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone.
Uh, Sir, if you can share your screen.
Okay, just a minute. Is the screen visible now?
Yes.
Sir. It's visible.
Okay. So, good afternoon, one and all. And before I start, thank you, AAken Advisory, and which in collaboration with Women in Business and IWLF for inviting me. And I'm absolutely delighted to speak to the audience. But before I start sharing my thought in the area of entrepreneurship, I just want to wish that all of one and your dear ones are safe at the moment. And on an auspicious moment of Navratri being starting today, I wish that all of us are safe. And what I've done is I've prepared myself for the topic of entrepreneurship. But before that, I just wanted to share a few of my thoughts on the current situation of crisis what the entire world is going through. And then immediately I'll move to the area of entrepreneurship. What I understand is almost the data what I saw today morning with close to 39.3 million people being affected, out of which 8.1 million being affected in India. And the good part is we've already got 6.52 million people, who've been recovered at the moment. So now what I feel or what my perspective at the moment talks about is that COVID-19 has been a situation. It's a crisis which has, been the worst in terms of health, economic crisis in last 100 years. What we must have, seen, and it has unprecedented negative consequences. Whether you talk about the output, whether you talk about jobs, you talk about well-being, or at various other fronts. It has dented the existing world order, global value chains, labor, capital, movement across the globe. So, when I look at this situation out of curiosity, I've got some questions into my mind, which talks about uh, how bad is the impact on the economy, or what could be the possible scenarios for recovery, and maybe what could be the lasting structural impacts from the crisis at the moment. And I really have no answers, or rather, none of the projections what we hear or we listen to are in a position to answer any of these questions for a simple reason because the trajectory for the virus itself is unknown now. So the good part here is that with the Unlock 5 happening today, I've seen that Indian economy especially has started to show the signs of going back to normalcy. and we've seen different trends. And the good part is that I've seen different trends across the big family businesses in India today. If I name Dabur, if I name RPG Group, I've seen a lot of emphasis being given by the organizations towards the employees' well-being, and all of them have come up with innovative ways to to make the employee feeling at ease so that he could continue to work from home. There have been instances where organizations have been talking about and giving services of doctor on a call or a psychological counseling to the employee, or maybe virtual team lunches. Now, this is something which has never been seen in the Indian context. But yes, I've seen that, and this was almost a new phase of the Indian corporates or the family businesses today. So, coming back to the masterclass topic on entrepreneurship, let me tell you that this masterclass has been specifically designed for the people who are professionals and who are practitioners. And I want to make your next 40 minutes very, very, very useful. So, the workshop order is as follows. In the first quick 2 to 3 minutes, I'll talk about why did I choose this topic. And then in next 5 minutes, I'll talk about a small introduction to the topic of entrepreneurship, which we also call as corporate entrepreneurship. And then I'll take it to the next level when I'll talk about corporate entrepreneurship in the Indian context, wherein we'll also talk about some of the practices and we'll also link it to the literature part. Then we'll talk about what is happening in the specific Indian context, where we'll talk about the brain drain phenomena. We'll talk about the employee engagement crisis. We'll talk about the entry of the younger workforce, who technically comprises the India 65% of the workforce today, the population today. And we'll talk about what is happening at this front. And at the same time, we'll talk about the changing work environment and how all these three things, what we've just spoken about, creates a triangulation which is not only good from the academia point of view, but is also very much, uh, you know, complex when you look at it from the corporate side of view, and how are corporates trying to handle this triangulation been coming up at the moment. Next, I'll talk about some live examples of corporate entrepreneurship in the Indian context, because if you look at entrepreneurship or corporate entrepreneurship, you get a lot of US examples or examples from the developed economies, whether it is Google, where it is 3M. But we'll talk about a lot of Indian organizations and what are their models and programs in the context of corporate entrepreneurship. And then I'll talk about how one of you guys could move forward in the area of corporate entrepreneurship, and how could you start with a small thing which is measuring the readiness of your organization. So this is going to be the flow for the entire next 35 odd minutes. So before that, I'll just talk about why did I choose this particular topic in this crisis time at the moment. Now, one of the most essential questions what comes to my mind in this, you know, COVID situation, or whether it's a normal situation, top bosses would always have specific questions in their mind, and these questions would be something like, what and how do we tap new sources of revenues, or how do we stay ahead of competition always? Now, when I hear to these questions, the only logical answer what I have in my mind is that it's all possible through entrepreneurship. So that's where in this time I thought we will talk about this topic of entrepreneurship. So I'll move to the introduction part. So entrepreneurship, if you look at it, has been a US phenomenon, was coined in somewhere in early 70s. If I give you more details about it, was first introduced in the academia community by Gifford and Elizabeth Pinchot in one of the articles in 1978. But if I have to give you a simple definition as to what you mean by, or how do you define corporate entrepreneurship, it says that it's a process through which different teams within the organization, inside an organization, conceive, foster, launch, and manage the new business, which is different from the existing business of the parent organization. But all of this thing is being done by leveraging the existing resources of the parent organization. Now, this to me, in simple terms, defines what corporate entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship is all about. Now, if I talk about how this field has evolved in last, let us say, odd 40 years, so we've seen this starting in early in US in the early 70s, wherein more of the emphasis between 81 to 94 was given in the area of individual entrepreneurs, wherein people were focusing more on the entrepreneurship characteristics. The organizational level emphasis was on entrepreneur, the individual characteristics, recognition, and support of entrepreneurs within the organization. Gradually, then we saw that the shift started coming in the area of formation of new corporate ventures, which was a period between 73 to 94, and focus on different types and different new ventures. They are fit within the corporations, and their enabling corporate internal environment was how it emerged to the second level of growth. Third was the area of entrepreneurial organization, wherein emphasis was on the characteristics of how organizations or how different organizations could actually, have entrepreneurship within them. And the last and the current phase, what we've seen is in the area of 2019 is corporate accelerators. A classic example, what Reliance Industries does in India. They have a accelerator program, and there are various other organizations who run this. So corporate accelerators can be, according to me, considered as the new form of entrepreneurship. Through corporate accelerators, corporations gain either by absorbing innovation or gaining early access to potentially disruptive ventures. Now, this is how the field has evolved, and at the moment, we see a lot of organization across globe looking at corporate accelerators as a model to implement entrepreneurship. So, let us look at for next 2 minutes in understanding what are a couple of dimensions of entrepreneurship, and then we'll gradually get into specific Indian organizations understanding their models. So the very first dimension for corporate entrepreneurship when I talk about is proactiveness. And how do I define this? Is it says that proactiveness in simple terms is an opportunity seeking or forward-looking perspective characterized by the introduction of new products, services ahead of the competition. So if I give you a classic example today, Google getting into driverless cars. Now, this to me is nothing but it talks about organization which is more from the the internet side, getting into the driverless technology. Or else I talk about Uber today getting into flying taxis. Now, these are a couple of examples of proactiveness to me. The second dimension for entrepreneurship talks about innovations. Now, innovations is the predisposition to engage in the creativity and experimentation through the introduction of either new products or through services, and as well as technological leadership via R&D in new processes. If I look at organizations like Procter and Gamble, I look at organizations like McDonald's, for which innovation is a matter of either a life or death. Now, this is a real sense of innovation to me. Third, I talk about self-renewal, which talks about the focus on the strategy formulation, reorganization, and organizational change. If you have to further dig into this, I'll give you a classic example, which says that 80% of the Fortune 500 companies which are listed in 1970, when I compared them 27 years down the line by the list of 1997 Fortune 100, 500 companies, I see that 80% of the companies which were there in 1970 do not even exist in the environment today in a span of 27 years. Going further, a report came by Deloitte in 2015, which says that 88% of the Fortune 500 companies which were there in 1995 were no longer present in the year 2015. Now, this was in one of the white papers by Deloitte in 2015. Now, this gives you a classic example, the need for self-renewal. And the last one talks about risk-taking. That is the willingness to commit significant level of resources to pursue entrepreneurial opportunities with a reasonable chance for failure. And this is exactly what the younger workforce today wants. Now, moving to the next part, talking about the benefits of entrepreneurship. Now, why would someone want entrepreneurship? The very first reason is profits, profits, and profits. And to me, profit is not a dirty word. This was the very first learning I had in my 11th standard economics class. It says that organizations are for profit and profit is not a dirty word. So entrepreneurship to be done, one of the biggest benefits is profitability. Second, if I move forward, if some organization is looking out for gaining knowledge for future revenue streams, again, this is another benefit for corporate entrepreneurship. Strategic renewal, very much we just spoke about it, helps the organization. Fourth, fostering innovation. Any organization looking out to have a culture of innovation either at process level or product level, or innovation at an incremental level or at a disruptive level. Entrepreneurship is the way. International success, yes, organizations looking out to move beyond the boundaries of the present country. Entrepreneurship is one of the ways to help organizations do that. Enhancing the competing capability for the organizations, yes, entrepreneurship also benefits organizations into this. And the last one, the growth. The growth of existing firms, regardless of their size, is also one of the biggest benefits of entrepreneurship, what I've seen, not only in academia but also in the real life, where we've studied organizations in understanding what have been their benefits from entrepreneurship. And the last one talking about is creating a competitive advantage. If I today talk about what Google is, so Google is Google to me because of the entrepreneurship culture. It is not the products what is been launched by Google what makes it different. It is the culture of entrepreneurship, the type of innovations they have within their culture is what makes Google different from others now. So this to me is a classic case of competitive advantage. We'll talk about entrepreneurship and the need in the Indian context. That why we now talking about entrepreneurship and how is the Indian context different from the US context now. So the very first thing I'll share my mind is in the area of brain drain phenomena. We'll talk about this into in depth. Second is employee engagement crisis, which not only India but across the world we've been seeing there's a big crisis when it comes to employee engagement. Then we'll talk about younger workforce, that is nothing but the demographic dividend and how entrepreneurship could be a way for the organizations to reap the demographic dividend. And the last one talking about the changing work environment. So coming to the brain drain phenomena, this is one of the best things which I came across on the social media front. Now this made my work simple to define what you mean by brain drain phenomena. So here's a talk between George Bush and Bill Gates. So George Bush is asking Bill Gates that we've got so much of unemployment and people from US are unemployed, and still you're hiring foreign engineers in Microsoft. And here's the answer what comes from Bill Gates. He says that if we stop employing foreign engineers, especially from India, then there will be another Microsoft born in India. Now this was a story which is true, but again, here is a development to this story that we have been seeing that there's a brain drain phenomena, that is people moving, that is talent moving from, India to US. But at the same time, now we also see that there's a reverse brain drain phenomena that the talent is again coming back to India. We'll talk about some organizations in detail, wherein we could see that because of the brain drain phenomena, the person or the employee left the organization and he started a similar organization and today became a competition to the parent organization what he left. If you Google out the history for Flipkart, I guess was founded across somewhere in 2007 by Sachin Bansal and Vinny Bansal. If you look at, both were the alumni of Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, and they both were working with Amazon before quitting their job and they founding Flipkart. Now, this is what I say is the brain drain phenomena. The existing employee quitting and starting a similar organization which gives a big competition to the firm where they were working. The second example what comes to my mind is popularly known as Naukri.com. Now, if you look at it, Sanjeev Bikhchandani, the alumni from IIM Ahmedabad, he was working with Hindustan milk food manufacturers, especially for the product marketing for Horlicks, before he quit his job and he actually started the organization Naukri.com. And the third one was Infosys, which comes to my mind, which says that if you look at Mr. Nagavara Ramarao Narayan Murthy, he left Patni Computer Systems and he started Infosys. So then, can we say that without Patni, there would have been no Infosys now? These are some examples which define the entire phenomena for brain drain phenomena concept. That how the talent who leaves your organization has the potential not only to join your competitor but to start an organization which can actually be a competitor to your current organization. Now, this one phenomena can be stopped if someone has the culture of entrepreneurship within the organization. Moving next, I'll talk about the need for entrepreneurship in the Indian context by the second phenomena what we've been observing at the moment, which is the employee engagement crisis, which is unique to India, yes, but it is also unique to the world. We'll talk about it, how this is affecting the organizations. So, in the area of human resource development, employee engagement is a very popular concept and started somewhere in early 90s. Believe one of the authors, Khan, was the one who coined this terminology. And in simple terms, he just talked about is that an employee is being considered to be engaged if he is physically, cognitively, and emotionally attached to the organization. But if you look at the real uh, benefits of the employee engagement, it is immense. So, employee engagement, there have been seen a lot of activities by the organizations to see that the engagement levels of the employees remain really high. But at the same time, if you look at some of the Gallup studies and the data what we get from there, the data what we get is something really shocking. If you look at it, one of the Gallup studies what we recently looked at talked about that worldwide the engagement rate is just 13% for the people. US, I guess it's approximately 32%. India, we came across one of the research in 2015 of Malhotra, which says India, the employee engagement rate is just 9%. And one of the reports we came across in 2016 said there's been no increase in the employee engagement rates across last full 1 decade across the world. Now, this is something an alarming as a situation. You look at it, employee engagement also has an impact on the economies. Now, because of the loss of productivity, it is costing the economies. And some of the data what we gathered was it almost is costing the US economy $300 billion every year. It is costing the Australian economy almost $31 billion every year. Moving to the next, we'll talk about what is happening in the Indian context with the younger Indian workforce, and we'll talk about it. What are the current trends now? So, if you look at it, the millennials and the Generation Z, they've entered the global workforce. I would define millennials as employees born between the age of 1980 to 1995. Generation Z is a generation cohort employee who is born between 1995 to 2015. If you look at it, combining both millennials and Generation Z is almost 65% of the Indian population today. On joining the workforce, the younger workforce have experienced a very difficult environment, and they've seen that fields such as education, fields such as medicine, fields such as business management, or even law, which were once assured route for growth in one's career, at present are no more lucrative for them. The younger workforce, which has good education, is considering a different kind of employment. They're looking out for employment which would give them, let us say, opportunities such as learning new things on the job, working with newer and different methods, offering opportunities which would allow them to take calculated risks. Now, this is what they are considering at the moment. And the younger workforce employees comes with a different mindset, wherein they do not consider competition, rather they believe in collaboration. They give importance to personal fulfillment at work. At the same time, if you look at it, these are people who would look out for working conditions where they could have higher transparency, more autonomy being given to them, so that they could deliver the task with full passion. They are looking out for work which is more meaningful, which has a purpose. They are looking out for jobs or environments which would offer them flexibility, trust, opportunity to collaborate. So if you look at it, younger workforce seeks jobs where they could get timely feedback. They are looking for flexible options. They also are looking out for jobs which would allow them to invest into their careers now. Moving further, I'll take up a small phenomena which is with the employee engagement rates, with the younger workforce coming into place. What is exactly happening at the current work environment and how has it been changed? So if you look at it, the current scenario, it says that changes has happened for the work environment at both levels, at economic front and at social front. The current generation of employees is witnessing a change at both the fronts, economic and social front. And recent decades, which has led to, let us say, the changes, and we've seen that there's no phenomena of secured jobs available today. At the same time, they do not believe in one job, one career, and this has led to younger workforce responding in a way that they are very skeptical about their employment, with talks about economic uncertainty, open discussions about low loyalty towards employers, has changed the preference of the younger workforce. And now they are skeptical about their employment. And this has automatically led that today the younger workforce does not follow the idea of one job, one career. Now, whatever we spoke in last, let us say 15 odd minutes, I would say this is where a triangulation has actually been formed, wherein we have the younger workforce entering the workplace, at the same time, the younger workforce having the characteristics of the entrepreneurs, and at the same time, the younger workforce experiencing the low level of employee engagement rates. That's where we propose and say that corporate entrepreneurship, or what we also call it as intrapreneurship, is a tool for the younger workforce so that they could remain engaged at their workplace. We'll talk about some organizations in India, and we'll talk about the programs, what they have, and how are organizations trying to implement entrepreneurship. If you look at it, a lot of literature available in the area of entrepreneurship when you talk about organizations from the developed economies or from US. We have a lot of examples of Procter and Gamble, Apple, 3M, the way 3M actually, was the pioneers who introduced the organizational slack as a concept and as a key factor enabling their engineers and scientists to spend 15% of their time on projects of their own. Similarly, the story of Google, wherein 80% of the employees' time is for regular work, wherein 20% is for the organizational slack or non-core projects or the real innovations. So we'll talk about some examples in India. If you look at Unilever, 2016, we came across an article which said that Hindustan Unilever is sending their employees to startups so that they could be there for a year to understand innovation as a culture, come back to Unilever's, and then try to implement that culture. India First Life Insurance, you look at it, the company came up with a vision to have 2020 vision to be in the top 5 insurance companies in the industry. And that's where the idea came up that why don't we implement entrepreneurship through the ecosystem so that we could have more and more innovations coming in from the employees. Mahindra and Mahindra Finance, I happened to interview these organizations, and what I learned was they've been doing entrepreneurship for approximately 8 to 9 years now, and they've revamped their corporate entrepreneurship models in recent time, and that's where out of 26,000 employees working with Mahindra and Mahindra Finance across geographies in India, they get ideas, give support time to the employees so that they could build on the ideas, and the ideas are then presented to the top management. SR Oil, having a concept wherein they could get themes from the SBU CEOs, and these themes have been then narrowed down on the scope and shared with the employees so that the employees could give ideas only on those themes. Johnson and Johnson's India, talking about two different models, having an incremental innovation in India, wherein having an industry creation model in US and China through corporate accelerators. Reliance Industries, Marico are the others whom we've seen trying to reap the benefits of the younger workforce through entrepreneurship. Reliance Industries also adopting the mode of corporate accelerators as a model. Now, this is where it gives you an idea that how organizations have been using this as a phenomena. RPG Group, in 2015, I came across one of the reports saying that has kept aside approximately 100 crores for as an innovation fund. So employees who want to leave the organization to become an entrepreneur now get an opportunity to share their ideas with the HR head so that they could validate it and they could see if this idea could be incubated or they could have the accelerator model for the same idea now. For me, looking at these organizations and with the success what they've achieved through their corporate entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship model, I thought I need to talk about the most initial phase for each one of you so that you could have an entrepreneurship as a culture within your organization. So this phase to me is nothing but measuring the readiness of the organization for entrepreneurship. 5 dimensions what one needs to look at it if you want to have entrepreneurship as a culture within the organization. The very first one to me is top management support. So top management support, if I define in my simple terms, talks about the extent to which one perceives that the top management support, facilitate and promote entrepreneurial behavior within the organization, which includes championing of innovative ideas and providing the resources to the people to require to take entrepreneurial action. Top management support has been found to have direct positive relationship with the innovations within the organization. Second one is work discretion. In simple terms, I define that it is to the extent to which one perceives that the organization tolerates failures, provides decision-making latitude and freedom from excessive oversight, and delegates authority and responsibility to the lower level managers and the workers. If you look at the entire research, it says that entrepreneurial opportunities are often best recognized by those with work discretion over how to perform their work. The third one as a dimension to me talks about rewards and reinforcement, which I explain as the extent to which one perceives the organization use systems that reward based on entrepreneurial activity and success. Reward systems that encourage risk-taking and innovation has been shown to have a strong effect on individuals' tendency to behave in entrepreneurial manner. And the fourth one here talks about time availability. It talks about a perception that the workload schedules ensure extra time for individuals and groups to pursue their innovations within jobs and structured in ways to support such efforts and achieve short-term and long-term organizational goals. We just recently spoke about how Google has 20% of their time been awarded only for this type of innovation. And the last one to me is the most important, talking about the organizational boundaries. The extent to which one perceives there are flexible organizational boundaries that is useful in promoting the entrepreneurial activity because they enhance the flow of information across the external and the internal organization environment. And this has been found to be very useful when it talks about entrepreneurship as an environment. So for me, any organization who is looking out for entrepreneurship as a culture, these are five dimensions one needs to look at it and work on so that they could then take the next move. So this to me is a preliminary move where one needs to first look at the basics and then move on to the next level. Now, the last point which I need to talk about today is once you know that these are the dimensions of entrepreneurship, how should one measure the readiness? So here is what I talk about. We've got instruments available. So the very first one talks about one needs to distribute the instrument and they need to administer it at all the levels across the organization. This is important so that the results can be examined based upon the level of management and different departments. In large organizations, one can take up a random sample of employees, but one needs to be very careful that when you do administer the instrument only with random samples, the buy-in could be a process, could be a challenge when you try to implement entrepreneurship as a culture because the employees then feel left out. Second is the moment you administer the instrument, you can give out an individual scoring to the employee so that he remains to continue with the curiosity what he has, and an initial feedback can be given to an employee wherein you could talk about to the employee in terms of his or her perception of the internal corporate entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship environment, and you should allow each employee to score the survey, and employee can transfer scores and take the average out of it. And the next part is talking about after having the individual scores in place, people could go to the organizational level scores. So this is for firms to assess their internal environment, how are they conducive for entrepreneurship, collect each participant's score sheet. And this is essential at this point of time that one administrating this at the organizational level, the information needs to be kept very confidential. So one can, after getting the forms, calculate the average scores to figure out what is the total score for the entire organization. The tools which are available also helps you to interpret the scores. And in general, higher the scores, the better it is. And it says that more of your organization is ready to implement the entrepreneurship culture. Organizations should examine their profile and identify weak areas at the moment. And the last one is the point of responsibility. The tool, what you're talking about, if it has been administered through a consultant or whether it has been administered through large teams within the organization, each department is assigned a group within each department should also empower to tally the scores and report the findings. But the good part about the tool is after reporting the scores, a session with each of the unit can be arranged to discuss the gaps. That is the beauty of the tools available to today measure the readiness of the organization for entrepreneurship as a culture, as the readiness of the organizations towards implementing the culture. With this, I now come to an end, and the time which was been allotted to me of I say 45 minutes, I still have taken 44 minutes out of it, and I've shared my perspectives, I've shared my mind about what is entrepreneurship, the need for entrepreneurship in terms of the Indian context, with some live examples which we've been studying for last 3 years during our study, and now talking about how should organizations move to the next level by doing the preliminary measurement of their readiness for entrepreneurship. So over to you now, and once again I would thank all of you to give me your patient listening, and now I'm ready for any question and answers from your side.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a very insightful session. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions by our esteemed delegates. We already have a few questions, but I would now like to go to the next session that we have, which is a Q&A round with Ms. Nehal Thakkar ma'am.